And welcome. This is African Perspective. I'm your host, Tsepiso Makwetla. With 6 days to go before South Africa goes to the polls, we'll take a look at how voting for South Africans living abroad went. And at 9:30, EFF leader Julius Malema joins us. You can send us your questions and comments via Twitter at African Perspec1. Now on to other news. The veteran actress Mary Twala's award, the Order of Ikamanga, has given her more reason to keep pushing for excellence in the television and film industry. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has bestowed the 80-year-old with the award in recognition of her contribution to the arts. As the country celebrates 25 years into democracy, Twala, who's currently in Lesotho shooting an international film, says though not perfect, she is hopeful about the future for democracy.
Hatinizulu. Here one is welcomed by the breathtaking Maluti Range scenery. This backdrop will feature in an international film where a vibrant 80-year-old Mary Twala plays a lead role in the film. She says the recent presidential award took her by surprise.
I was surprised, I was shocked. Anyway, I just said, God, be with me. I'm happy, very much happy that people have recognized me for this big award.
Twala says that the 25-year celebration of freedom should be a wake-up call for those in power to heed to the needs of the people, especially in the arts industry.
The party I'm voting for should work harder on these things. They should not just say, hey, we've been elected with the greatest. The party that wins should push everybody to go forward in this industry for ours.
Twala's director says she's impressed with the work of the dynamic and versatile actress.
People want to go to Joburg, they want to go to Cape Town. Lesotho has everything. The rural areas have a lot of talent, but we do not have the people to push these kids to go on with this thing.
And even in her prime age, Twala shows no signs of slowing down.
Mary is absolutely just a magnificent person, so professional, an incredible actress, inspiring that at 80 years old she's still working, she's incredibly fit, she's hiking, riding horses, running around as if she was an 18-year-old, always with an amazing sense of humor. It's been an absolute joy to work with her.
I mean, she's in her golden ages now. She's platinum. It's very amazing working with her, I must say. She makes my job very easy. It's very stressful doing a movie. It's very stressful, I must say. And working with experienced people like her makes me feel like, wow, I'm one of the legends now, I think.
Wow.
And I want to see you in the next 20 years again, still pushing.
Exactly, you will see me. I'm not that type that says, oh, I'm getting old. Give me a 16-year-old, I'll play the 16-year-old character. I'll do it. Why not? I am Mary. Finish and flower.
The film opens with the character Manto played by Mary Twala. She starts preparing for her own death, but she is disturbed as she learns that her village is going to be resettled to make way for a construction of a dam. Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Hatinizulu, Lesotho.
So South Africans abroad have cast their vote, which coincided with Freedom Day, the 27th of April. Almost 30,000 worldwide registered. Our reporter Holly Hudson has a picture in London.
Ordinary Lesotho, friends and dignitaries gathered together to congratulate South Africa on its Silver Jubilee independence celebration. Lesotho is among frontline member states that played a key role in aiding South Africa attain its freedom, but echoes that true freedom must include free movement of people and goods.
This freedom of movement of people, goods and services is an ideal that we should strive for, not only between our two countries, but with Southern African Customs Union and Southern African Development Community and the entire continent.
The High Commission also invited representation from ordinary Lesotho to hear how best the ties between the two countries can be improved through shared knowledge.
Geographically, culturally, socially and economically, Lesotho and South Africa are unique and symbiotic neighbors. For example, Mofolo in Soweto, a center of arts and culture, a hub of cultural and artistic exploration in Soweto. The township was named after Mosotho, author, translator, and educator Thomas Mofolo, who wrote the book Shaga.
South African High Commissioner to Lesotho Sello Moloto thanked Basotho for their hospitality during tough apartheid years, but says they should now jealously guard the progress made through the reforms process.
It is time for all Basotho to rise to the occasion and put the country first before narrow individual or political interests.
Last year during Freedom Day, South Africa committed to implementing steady improvement in relation to easier movement of goods and people, and Moloto believes some strides have been made. Rapelang Khatebe, SABC News, Masego, Lesotho.
Right, so that's Lesotho. Let's take you to London now, where, as we said, South Africans there voting on Freedom Day.
25 years to the day since South Africans voted in the first democratic election, expats from all over the UK came to the High Commission in central London to have their say on what happens back home.
At the end of the day, we're going to go back home, and we still got our relatives back home. So we want things to change.
We want to make a difference.
We want to make a difference in South Africa. We believe that there can be change.
So we feel we must use it.
People sometimes just assume because you live here now that you've forgotten your home and your heritage. I mean, that's like home is home. My family's still there. I go home every time, and I have intentions of moving back to South Africa. So, of course, I want to participate in changing our country and making it better.
The 2-hour wait in the wind and rain was helped by handouts of biltong. More South Africans marked their ballot in London than any other overseas country, with over 9,000 registered here in total. But efforts by the Electoral Commission to make the process easier, including putting on extra staff from Pretoria, were felt.
The lines are going great, they're going smooth, everybody's, excited to be here. It's really, really great, really organised. The IEC's done a great job.
South Africa's new High Commissioner to the UK was also happy with the vote, her first since being appointed, and paid tribute to those who had made the journey.
It's an expensive expedition to come and vote, because very often, people, the trains are not cheap in London. And then if you're coming from so far with your children, I think it's quite a challenge, and I think people should be quite proud of themselves. It shows a huge commitment, I think, to the future of the country.
This time round, there were 48 parties on the ballot paper, but in London, just 2 stood out as having the strongest support.
The last 2 elections, we've had over 80% of the votes in favour of the DA, and by far we're seeing the same sort of numbers today. People are really enthusiastic about the DA. A lot of them have said to us it's the only choice, but obviously for us it's the best choice for our country and the best party to take our country forward.
The turnout in terms of the vote actually shows that people are still willing to make the necessary changes that the country desires, and they are very, very hopeful of a very democratic, transparent and reliable government that will actually serve the interests of the people of South Africa.
Over the coming week, the ballots from London will be collected, sealed and sent back to South Africa to be counted in 10 days' time.
Well, it has been raining here and it's still very cold and windy, but despite the British weather, as expected, thousands of South Africans have turned out in Trafalgar Square to have their say. We won't know, though, who they voted for until after the general election in South Africa itself on the 8th of May. Holly Hudson, SABC News, London.
So thousands of South Africans turning up at voting stations around the world this past Saturday, we said, from Auckland, New Zealand to Los Angeles in California in the United States. Citizens marked 25 years of democracy in the best way possible by marking an X next to the party of their choice, among them 48 vying for power in this year's elections. New York-based correspondent Show and Bryce P spoke to a number of them on that day.
For me, I've been very closed off in my own world, like just go to school, direct your own future and everything. But I've realized that I cannot remove politics from my everyday living. It affects everything. It affects the economy. It affects the status of the country, jobs, everything. So it is very important for me to vote.
A quarter of a century still makes us a young democracy, and I know that we're a growing democracy with growing pains still. And I watch our progress, its ups and its downs. I see us taking a variety of different paths. Some of those paths are working out better than others. I feel confident about where we're going right now.
Well, just we need to give the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, a fresh mandate, to deal with all these challenges that we have in corruption, the economy, unemployment, and so that's basically it.
We care about our country and about everyone having a voice, and freedom of expression I think is important for me. So I think if we take part as citizens in that, then we're doing our job to be part of building a better future.
And it's an enormous privilege to vote. And I'm currently working and staying in the United States. I'm very worried about the current political climate here, and voting for democracy is so important here.
I just want, human beings to be looked after. Doesn't matter black or white, but I look for people to have a better life. I've been living in New York for 7 years, and I look the lifestyle here and the lifestyle back home. I'm thinking, oh my God, if we could do better. So I'm just looking for economy for everyone to have a better life.
I think voting for your country is very important. It's always an important vote, especially this one. Every vote makes a difference, so if you can, you should come and vote.
I think I saw a stat the other day that said South Africa's had 1% economic growth over a decade, and as an emerging market with so many talented people and a huge workforce that's currently unemployed and the natural resources we have, I just think it's not good enough. And I think we have so much opportunity.
It was very exciting, a little nervous, but super exciting. I mean, it's an honor, it's a pleasure, to be able to be here to vote. I'm not home, but to have the honor to be able to do that, it's been amazing.
And of course, now we speak to our correspondent in our bureau in New York, Sharon Bryce P. So, Sharon, some of them really excited. Some have been there for a short space of time. Some of them for a very long time. Were there any concerns that they expressed?
If I were to rank the concerns at Tsepiso, I think the main concern expressed to us, to me personally, by voters is questions around the economy. I think you get a sense of that just from the vox pops we were just watching. Very much a concern about the rate of growth in South Africa, that it's not at a rate fast enough to tackle the stubbornly high unemployment that we've become so familiar with in South Africa, and certainly in parts of our region. Secondly, the questions of corruption. I think, there's one soundbite in there where the guy talks about, we need to give President Cyril Ramaphosa a proper mandate so that he can tackle some of the revelations that are emerging in places like the Commission or the State Capture Commission and various other publications that are in the public domain now. But the most consensus, I think, that we observed was that people were coming out. It was the 25th anniversary of South Africa's democracy, and they felt that they had to come out and express their civil duty. There were a number of first-time voters, which was very encouraging. The last clip there, very excited, young 20-year-old who's studying in the United States. She felt that this was her duty as a citizen of this country, that people had sacrificed so much for them to be afforded this right. So if I were to rank them in three ways, economy first, corruption second, and generally people coming out because they believe that this was a right that people sacrificed so much for, and coming out to vote was showing respect to that struggle.
Sharon, there was also some anxiety or concern by some about the secrecy of their vote. Was there any particular reason some of them were having this consternation?
Well, I call it envelope gate. Essentially, Tsepiso, voters abroad only vote in the national election, right? On May 8th, people will vote in both the national and the provincial election back home. So what happened was you were given a ballot with all 48 parties on that. You make your cross in a private booth, and then you seal that ballot in an unmarked envelope. The final step after that was then to take that sealed envelope that's unmarked and put it in a separate envelope, another envelope, on which you needed to put your identity number, your ID number, your name, and your voting district. The reason the IEC had the second envelope step was to ensure that people did not vote twice, to eliminate voter fraud. So as we understand it from the IEC, those ballots are going to be sent in those marked envelopes to IEC headquarters in Pretoria, where the first envelope is going to be removed to ensure that the person only voted once. And then that unmarked ballot, that unmarked envelope is going to be put into another ballot box, Tsepiso, which will then be counted among a host of other ballots after when polls close on May 8th. So there was some confusion. People didn't like this idea that they had to put their name and their voting district, because essentially their X, their mark, is in that marked envelope. But as the IEC has explained, it will be, the unmarked envelope will be removed from the marked envelope and then put into a separate ballot box in Pretoria at IEC headquarters, where the balloting and counting will happen after May 8th.
And speaking of counting, Sherwin, that's what we'll be doing on Wednesday in terms of voter turnout. We just mentioned that 30,000 were registered. How was the turnout on the 27th?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because we don't have the final numbers from the IEC, how many of those 29,300,000 voters, or certainly who are eligible, who completed their VEC 10 forms to be on the IEC voters lists around the world, how many of those actually showed up on the day. At the polling station here in New York, there were 605 registered voters, Tshepiso, and of that number, about 402 showed up to vote. We understand that some people were turned away. They thought they had completed the VEC 10 form because they were registered in New York, but unfortunately hadn't indicated through that application that they would be voting at a polling station. So we understand there were a few turnaways. There was apparently one spoiled ballot here in New York, but of the 605, essentially 402 people actually showed up. And I mean, I guess that's life. People had to travel perhaps at the last minute and couldn't be here to vote. But I was certainly one of those 402.
Well, I'm glad to hear that after all of that hard work. Thanks a lot, Sherwin. Sherwin Bryce-P is our correspondent out there in New York. So the Electoral Commission here in South Africa has expressed satisfaction with the way voting progressed abroad. Around 30,000 South Africans, as we said, living abroad, casting their votes on Freedom Day, the 27th, hoping to make a difference in the 2019 general elections.
We're happy with the turnout. I mean, over just about 30,000 people registered to vote overseas, which is quite encouraging. But there's a larger population than that of South Africans not at home. And there must be some problem on why some of them did not register, either the requirements that they did not meet, but others just sheer, should I say, carelessness. They just did not fulfill the requirements to register themselves to vote. In fact, others confused registering to be on the voter's roll and registering to say, I will be in this particular mission on this day. I mean, for a simple logic, if you are a registered voter and you are in South Africa when you register, but on May 8, you are going to be in a different country in the world, you then need to give us notice of where you will be. You could be already overseas in France, but on 27 April, you would have been in New York, and we wouldn't know that you are there. So you have to give us notice of the mission where you will arrive to come and vote. And that's what was missed by a number of them, and I saw some of them reacting in the social media. And the simple response on our side is that you did not give us notice of where and which mission you will appear to vote.
Okay. And just
The man is dead.
All right, so that's the picture in other parts of the world, and South Africans have been voting. You know that there are special votes. That has closed here at home, South Africa, but those who voted overseas did so next week, Wednesday. That is the 8th of May. South Africans go to the polls to choose their party of their choice. We'll be speaking to one of the youngest leaders in the country, EFF leader Julius Malema, later on about his perspective of the upcoming vote, but of course of Africa. Get to learn a little bit more about him and his party's propositions on how to govern. We'll take a look at social media comments as well shortly. All right, so let's see some of them coming in. Nazim Khropom says, what role do politicians play to attract the youth to join their parties? These are questions for Mr. Malema. We'll ask some of them, hopefully all of them, but not sure if we can. Matia Heavystone says, what is the position of the EFF government on exorbitant bank loans on properties like houses and vehicles? So we'll pose those questions. Do keep them coming at African Perspec 1. Get your questions in and we'll pose them to Mr. Malema. Let's take a quick break.
Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you.
All that's serious deserves a glass of not so serious. Come fill yours with Johnny Walker Red Label. Get a 750ml bottle and a 1-litre Schweppes Ginger Ale combo for only $219.99. Only from Tops at Spar. Not for persons under the age of 18.
We're explorers. We always have been. Endlessly curious. Always looking for answers. For new frontiers. For new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen, from yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
Welcome back. So before we talk to the EFF leader, Julius Malema, first this, around 800 South Africans in Germany cast their ballots in Berlin. The SABC's Iris Spitzer reports from the South African embassy in Berlin.
They're a long way from home, but these South Africans in Germany are exercising their right to vote. 25 years to the day after South Africa's first democratic elections in 1994.
People are still as enthusiastic about the democracy as they were then. So this is very positive for us and a very positive message to the world.
More than 800 South Africans have signed up to cast their ballots in Germany. South Africans living in Germany can either vote here at the embassy in the nation's capital or in the southern German city of Munich. Many traveled several hours for the chance to take part in these elections.
I came from the Harz Mountains, close to Quedlinburg, and I take it onto me to come by train, and I also stayed overnight to make sure that I'm on time here for voting.
For me, it's a really important thing to vote. Apparently, I was a year old when my mom voted for the first time in 1994. So since then, she's been telling me how privileged we are to have the right to vote.
Overseas voters vote in national, but not the provincial elections. While many have been in Germany for years, they're largely focused on the same issues as voters back home, like the economy.
I would like to see change in South Africa. I would like to see people living a better lifestyle. also having jobs.
After the polls close here, the ballots are sent to South Africa to be counted there after domestic voters head to the polls on the 8th of May. Ira Spitzer, SABC News, Berlin.
Right, as you know, EFF leader Julius Malema denounced xenophobic attacks against Africans during a party rally in Rustenburg in the northwest on Sunday. Malema reiterated his call for all Africans to unite and said those who are xenophobic and disagreed with the party could keep their votes. He was referring to a recent spate of xenophobic attacks in KwaZulu-Natal, which saw 2 people fatally wounded. We saw people in Durban beating up Africans, he said. They hit them, some died, the hands of black people. We know who you are and what you're saying. But the thing about it, though, is Julius Malema has been described as an enigma. A lot of people in Africa would ask, who is Julius Malema? He's described by some as a firebrand leader. Some say that he is an abrasive leader. Some even accuse you of racism. And others see you as the hope of young people going into these elections. So we're talking to EFF leader Julius Malema. Some pundits have said that because of their entry into politics, the EFF have raised the bar in terms of debate ahead of the elections. But let me ask you, who is Julius Malema? Tell the African people, how should we see you?
Well, I'm just a young African who's active in politics, who loves his continent and loves his people, who wishes to see good in the whole entire continent and the diaspora, because we believe that we are, victims of an attack and onslaught against black people, particularly Africans, and therefore we have a responsibility to stand for ourselves.
The manner in which you're described by some, do you think it is as a result of the challenges of political leadership or the narrative created around you, how the media has fashioned you as a character?
Well, as a human being, you can't be loved by everyone. You are not money. So people will describe you differently. Others will love you. Others will hate you. Others will create a non-existing monster just to scare other people because of their selfish interests, but also to defend the status quo. All what is important is for you to know yourself, so that when others describe you, you know that this is not me. It doesn't matter how they describe you. Even if they overdo it in terms of praising you, you should be able to say, but this is not me. I've got my own faults. I've got my own mistakes. I'm not perfect, particularly when I grew up in the struggle. I was young. I had to learn 1 or 2 things, and I'm continuing to learn even today. I can't say I'm perfect. I can't say I know politics. I'm still learning.
Of course, you joined the African National Congress at the age of 9. So from a very early age, you were political. So when you say you're still learning, some of the militancy, do you think it's militancy with a cause? Is that what you're
Absolutely.
saying?
This militancy, actually almost everything that I say today, I said it when I was very young. That's what I've always been fighting for. I fought for black people. I have always associated with the leadership that was victimized both by Stratcom and factional politics of UDF. I've always spoken truth to power, and many people who are so used to lies have got a problem with a person who speaks the truth, especially if it's a young African person coming from a poor family, a child of a domestic worker. They can't tolerate it. The first question they ask is, who is he to tell us the truth?
Is that a race, gender, or class thing?
Well, it's an oppression on its own. An oppression is based on gender, it's based on class, it's also based on where we are located ourselves as Africans. Because in the African continent, we cannot speak as equal to those who are outside our continent or those who visited our continent.
I ask this question because some have regarded you as having a rather hostile relationship with the media.
Yeah.
And on the 3rd of May, which is Friday, is World Media Freedom Day. And human rights, which we're speaking about, of media, is a very important aspect. And the theme for this year has to do with media reportage, especially elections and disinformation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the EFF policy on the media is that it must self-regulate. We don't want to regulate the media, and that alone should tell you that we have no problem with the media. When you criticize a journalist, that cannot be described as a policy position of the EFF or Julius Malema. People should learn to read and not rely on snippets. So the EFF is for media freedom. The EFF wants media to fight fake news. The media must report objectively. The media must report fearlessly. And the media must never be factional and partisan. Because if it does that, it will compromise the whole media freedom.
Is the South African media largely doing that?
No, not at all. There are some elements, individuals who have bought into the status quo, who are used by the white monopoly capital to push a certain narrative in the media. Media is contested. To say South African media is completely biased or the continental media is completely biased is to become a crybaby. When you show the mistakes of the media, you are not being a crybaby. You are saying to the media, we will always criticize you so that you don't compromise the media freedom.
I suppose some would say it's in the how and not the what. And when you say, if you look at the continental media, but we'll go to Western media, especially on the issue of Zimbabwe. In 2010, you went to go visit President Robert Mugabe, who was criticized by some as being a person behind strongman politics, authoritarian, a dictator, and you were critical of how he was covered. But then some say you later flip-flopped and turned your back on President Robert Mugabe. Your response to that?
No. The Western media will never cover us properly because anyone that challenges the Western powers is going to be portrayed as unreasonable, as a monster, and that's what they did with President Mugabe. All we are saying in the EFF is that no one must leave office with a coffin. And that's what we said about President. It's not flip-flopping. At some point, President Mugabe had to go. It doesn't matter how good you may be. At some point, you must leave. You can't live with a coffin. And when the time comes for you to leave, expect us to say, no, this person must not leave. That will be undemocratic tendency that is unacceptable in the EFF. All we are saying, in the African continent, leaders must know when it is time to say goodbye and not want to leave.
When do you say it's time? And I'm glad you say it's about a time factor, because if we look at the situation in the Sudan now, in 2015, I think you called on African leaders to protect Hassan Omar al-Bashir, but then you later said he must rot in jail. So I think that's where the confusion for some sets in, as in, where do you stand on some of these issues?
No, Bashir must be held accountable for his crimes. But we were not going to arrest Bashir. Where was it going to put us in terms of diplomatic relations in the continent? It would have compromised us. Remember, in Sudan already, where our soldiers were, they already surrendered by the Sudanese army. And it would have created a bad image for South Africa if we had acted in that way. Having said that, it doesn't mean he must not be held accountable. If he was found guilty or is needed for crimes committed against humanity, he must be held accountable. But sorry, we cannot say to al-Bashir, we have given you immunity. When he comes here, we arrest him. It will lead into serious divisions of the continent. It will also create diplomatic relations, not only with Sudan, with many other African continents who will say to us, but you said this guy can come, there won't be problems. Why did you set him up? We're not going to respond to that. We should have made a call very clear before al-Bashir left Sudan that if you dare land in South Africa, we're going to arrest you. Let's not pretend and later on then play into the gallery to impress the Western media and the Western powers. It's none of our business. They are looking for al-Bashir, they know where to find him. Let them go and find him in his country. Why do they want to find him in our country?
So let's talk about South Africa's image, and especially in the affairs of the politics. You talk about us being careful about having a bad image. You made a comment about South Africa's position on Libya in 2018 and our hypocrisy as you saw it. And obviously Libya is where it is now. There's an insurgency going on. How much responsibility do we bear?
It's a mess. We must take full responsibility. I told Zuma, and a friend of Zuma, Ngwagura Matlodi, who you could not criticize Zuma in his eyes at the time. That day he shocked all of us when he stood up in the meeting and said to Zuma, you made a historical blunder. And this is going to haunt us for a very long time. We have collapsed the country now. We should have defended that country. We should have said to the brother leader through African platforms that the brother, let's find a creative way to leave the country so that by the time you leave, there is stability in that country. We allowed the Western powers to dictate to us, and Zuma bought into that agenda. There is no country. There will never be a country. I don't know what it will take for us to restore a peace and stability in Libya. We need a strong African Union that is going to take a position on Libya and act decisively. Do
we have a strong enough African Union, for instance?
No, we don't have a strong African Union. Is bruskap, is brothers who do each other favors, who don't tell each other the truth right in front of each other's face and say, you are wrong here, you are wrong there. This is the direction we want to go. It is our generation which must fight for borderless Africa and create one country out of this continent called United States of Africa, with one president, with one currency, with one continental parliament, and the rest of this other state should be held accountable to the United States.
And I'm going to talk about the role of the youth in just a moment, but how do we give the African Union more teeth? Some have been critical of South Africa and its chairmanship of the AU when there were incidents such as Burundi, where there were calls of extending the constitution for a greater reign for the president. Why are we not acting under those instances of those despots?
I said to you earlier, it's a meeting of friends who don't have a clear agenda of what they want to do with the continent. And they are unable to call each other to order. They are unable to say this is the type of an agenda we want. They are enjoying the privileges that comes with the so-called presidency of smaller countries.
Who do you see as the biggest culprits?
Come again?
Who do you see as the biggest culprits on the African continent being guilty of that?
No, the biggest culprit is not even Africa itself. It is the West, it is the imperialists, it's the colonizers who enjoy the divisions in Africa, because the more we continue to see each other through tribes, through countries, the more they exploit our resources. A united Africa is a threat to imperialism and colonialism. They will never agree to it.
So when we return, we'll be talking about that. No borders, says Julius Malema. What is the role of the youth and how can we ensure greater participation, that we have a different type of leadership? Don't go away. This is African Perspective.
Next, wrong form. blue one, green 4, orange 4, periwinkle blue 4.
Yo, all that serious deserves a glass of not so serious. Come fill yours with Casa Light. Get a case of 340ml handies for only $199.99. Only from Tops at Spar. Not for persons under the age of 18.
We do not just speak. We let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach. We empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news. We place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain. We take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport. We create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses. It's all made possible by you.
Welcome back. You're watching African Perspective in conversation with one of South Africa's youngest leaders, certainly the youngest leaders to go to Parliament with his economic freedom fighters. Julius Malema joins us in studio to talk about himself, his party's policies, and of course the role of the African youth in government. So we were talking about the global world order before we went to break, and you were saying that it's important that young leaders change the status quo. But are young leaders given the opportunity to do that? And I want you to take yourself as an example. Do you think you're taken seriously at times, or do you think people just look at you as this young man who is shouting in the streets and throwing rocks?
Well, with regard to me, at the beginning, they were doing that, but they realized there is no way you can avoid him. You'll have to engage him. You'll have to take him into confidence in order to have the country moving forward. There is a general crisis of ageism in the continent. That's why there is a campaign which we support as the EFF, which started in Nigeria, that said, we are not too young to lead. There were certain countries with certain laws that said you can only be a member of parliament if you've got this or that age, or if you are this or that age. That is unacceptable. It's not about age. It's about ideas. It's about commitment. It's about political will to change your country. And we support that campaign that says we are not too young to lead.
But
Allow
what
us
is
to go
failing
to
young
Parliament.
Africans? Because you mentioned at your inauguration at the Pan-African Parliament that there needs to be more young people, there needs to be more women. So it's obviously an issue of inclusivity. But what is preventing you from being an active part of democracy, participating in governance in your various countries as a youth, even though you're the largest demographic on the continent?
Of course, the youth is beginning to appreciate that they have to take over positions of responsibility. They must lead the struggle in the continent. And we see this as the EFF with the emergence of EFF organizations in the entire continent. In Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Zambia, there are organizations now that are being called EFF, led by young people. And I just said to you now, in countries like Nigeria, there are campaigns where young people are beginning to say, we are not too young to lead. So the old people who are threatened by the youth went to an extent of passing the law of suppressing young people to allow them to lead. And young people are saying, no, we're no longer going to allow that going forward. We are the leadership of this continent.
And yet Nigeria is a perfect example, because look at the two contenders in the last elections and look at who won, somebody who's almost 80. So there clearly
not
is
almost 80 only. He's also sick. He's not in a good state of health. He's forever visiting London to get medical checkups. That person comes back instead of Nigerians saying to him, We thank you for your service. Please go and rest. Look after your health. We have that problem as a continent.
So
we must accept it and confront
You spoke about the Pan-African Parliament, and when you were there, some of the speeches that you made, you called out certain countries and leaders for being corrupt and saying that they are the ones that are robbing the youth of opportunities. But who are you calling out? Because is it a general statement about Africa, or who is guilty of this? Which countries' leaders should be called out?
No. It's a general state. It's a general phenomenon, by the way, in the continent where leaders steal from their people. And we're beginning to say the reason we do not have services going into communities and villages and townships is because of corruption. If we get rid of corruption in the continent, we will be able to deliver our countries and have a government that cares about our people. It's not about this or that individual. It's about all of us looking at ourselves and saying, what is wrong with our continent? How do we fix it?
And I'm glad you said that. We have 2 or 3 social media tweets in just a moment, but I'm glad you speak about that, because in South Africa you're campaigning on the back of breaking the back of corruption. And I want to go back to what has become a contentious issue, a cloud around the EFF. There are questions about whether or not your hands are clean. Can you categorically say yes?
Yes, our hands are clean. You can't find us in the VBS. You can't find us in the Guptas. You can't find us in Busasa. There is no any serious scandal where you can bring a page from those hearings and investigations and point out that in page number 9, the paragraph 3, that's where the EFF is mentioned.
You've recently opened up your financial records to the media.
We did that. We said to them, let's come and scrutinize the finances of the EFF. We have nothing to hide. They throw that mud at us to delegitimize our call to fight against corruption.
So let's take a look at this tweet that has come through from one of our viewers. And let's see if we can put it up. And it's from Leslie saying, CIC should explain more about the importance of open borders. CIC should also dwell more on the issue of land expropriation without compensation. I'm more interested in it because I want a beautiful piece of land and I saw it in Basonia. So it's a very important question.
Yeah.
A lot of young people.
Yeah.
And across the continent, it's a continental issue. How belligerent should young people be about this issue?
No, we want the land. The liberation of the African continent is about the land. Look at what they are doing in Congo. Look at what they are doing in all parts of Africa, exploiting and financing civil wars in order to continue stealing our resources. We don't need war. The expropriation of land in the continent can be done through a legislative, peaceful process which allows everyone to participate and let the will of the majority be the order of the day. That's what the Western powers have always said, that the majority will always rule. Let the majority say, this is the direction we want for the continent, and those who respect democratic process should be able to accept that the Africans are now beginning to expropriate their land.
But are we free?
We want a borderless continent because that's what we were. They came here and imposed borders on us. And to glorify these borders, you are unwittingly supporting colonialism and imperialism.
But are we free to effect that dream, that wish?
We are free. We only need ourselves. We don't need anyone. The African leaders, especially ourselves as the young ones, we must begin to have that conversation so that when we ultimately take over our continent, we are all at one. Let us not be trapped in these nice things that comes with small packages of being a president of a small country. Let's have a bigger vision. A united Africa is a threat to China, it's a threat to America, it's a threat to Europe. Let us not be subjects of imperialism. Let us be equal partners in the whole world if we want to be taken
seriously. I actually asked you that question because I wanted, when I said, are we really free in our general global order, looking at a country like Venezuela, you spoke out against imperialism. And there are those who suggest that it's precisely because of Western leaders wanting a particular person in governance that Venezuela is where it is. What's your thought process on
We
that?
agree with that. There's nothing Maduro is doing wrong in Venezuela. The imperialist forces want that oil, and they can't find that oil under the leftist politics and policies. So we must defend Venezuela, because if we are going to fail to defend Venezuela, we'll remain with what we have in Libya. There's never been a Western intervention which has brought about peace and stability in any country. Let the people of Venezuela resolve their own problems. They only show protesters who are wearing nice suits against the government of Venezuela. They do not show the masses that go out in their numbers in defense of their own government. There's nothing that imperialism will tell us which will result into sustainable and peaceful countries. Let us learn our lessons and not listen to them.
Mr. Malema, the things that you're saying, obviously we've spoken about a broad number of issues. Are there political parties here in South Africa that share the same vision that you think that you could work together with, should you need to, after the elections?
There's not really a party in South Africa that shares the same vision with us. The rest of other parties that looks like us, they are led by tribalists who can't allow other people who don't come from, such as the new parties that have been formed under NUMSA. If you want to say you share a policy with them, their leadership will never subject themselves to any other person who's a non-Xhosa speaking person. They've never allowed that. And yet the policies might look the same. What stops them is tribalism. Nothing else that makes them not to work with the EFF. NUMSA was supposed to be an automatic ally, but they can't see themselves as being an automatic ally under a different leadership, because the policy is clear. They went to a conference. A huge portion of their conference was saying, but why a new party? Because the EFF is there. It's politics of ego. It's politics of tribalism that restricts them from allowing such, working together as left forces to defeat the current status quo.
Are these lessons learned from coalition agreements you've had in the past?
We never had any coalition agreement with anyone. We don't have any coalition with anyone. We are voting the DA in Johannesburg and Twala to keep the corrupt out. And that DA, from time to time, when it wants the vote from the EFF, we put a condition. Just today alone, we hired more than 950 security guards in Johannesburg as permanent employees. It's not a DA policy, it is an EFF policy, but the DA is forced to implement it. Why? When the budget comes, they will need the EFF vote. That's how we use our influence to empower the defenseless masses of our people. And we were happy that on a workers' day, we could hire security guards permanently into a municipality with benefits, with pension funds, with medical aid, and their jobs are secured. They are no longer temporary.
In short, would you consider any coalition agreements or partnerships?
We will talk to them. I said today in Alexandra that before the talks, they must go and clean the black townships, both the DA and the ANC. Before we go and sit down, if it is possible for us to work together, we want Sidibeng cleaned up. We want Alexander cleaned up. Not put pipes, not put electricity. Don't build a house. Just go and do a cleaning of rubble and the rubbish that we find in black townships. Only then we can sit down to start talking about coalitions. Otherwise, we're not talking to anyone. DA in Kailicha must go and clean Kailicha. We want a Kailicha that is clean, that looks like Cape Town, the city, the town.
All right. Thank you very much.
Then we can start talking.
Thank you very much, Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema. That's how we come to the end of African Perspective tonight. The Globe is up next. But before we go, Africans of all ages have a sense of rhythm, as we know. And as the Bible says, raise your children in the way they should go. From all of us here, good night.